Welcome to Soul Care, a time for you to find a little light in the darkness. Maybe you remember Elijah. He was in a dark cave for 40 days. God called him out of the darkness of the cave to stand up on the mountain. But first, Elijah remained hovering in the cave, listening to the wind. Rocks were falling, an earthquake shook the earth beneath him. Peering out of the cave, Elijah could see a fire light up the sky. He was still alone. God was not in the wind. God was not in the earthquake, and God was not even in the fire. Then, after the fire, came a sound of sheer silence. And Elijah knew that God had passed by. He listened to the silence and he wrapped his coat around his face and went out from the entrance of the cave. There on the mountain, out of the sheer silence that surrounded him, he heard God's voice. In some versions, it was a still, small voice, and in other versions, it was just sheer silence. The awesome silence in God's presence gave Elijah the courage to go back down the mountain and anoint kings and prophets. We often have a hard time with darkness and silence. I remember a time on a family vacation when we visited Sunset Crater Volcano. It's one of those amazing Arizona places to visit with ponderosa pines and mountains and lava flow from a volcano. There's a narrow lava tube there called the Ice Cave that was available if people wanted to go down in. You had to be at least 12 years old. And our oldest child, Eric, was 13, and he was one never to miss an adventure. I didn't want him to do it alone. It sounded kind of scary, so I agreed to go along. So we entered from a hole in the ground. The tube leveled off, and we crawled into this very narrow tube, inch by inch. Immediately, we were engulfed in complete darkness. I couldn't even see Eric, who was inches in front of me. And then there was someone inches behind me, but I could see no one. We crawled silently. I knew I couldn't go back. The line of crawling people filled the tube. I had to go forward. I couldn't sit up, and the cave was too small. There was barely enough room to crawl at all. Fear rose up in me like a panic. I wanted out. I wanted to scream, but I knew I couldn't. I'd never been claustrophobic before, not like that, but I'd also never been in such a confined place in complete darkness and silence. Nobody was there telling me, oh, you just have a few more feet to go. I heard nothing but our breathing inside this tube. I figured logically, well, they wouldn't have let us do this if it was dangerous. And screaming wouldn't do any good, it would just panic everyone. So I used my mind over matter as best I could and my Lamaze breathing to calm myself and to keep going until finally we reached a bigger space and we could stand up in the darkness and then walk forward toward a speck of light. I recognized in myself a lack of trust. Any self-confidence that I had had succumbed to fear in that darkness and silence of the cave. Well, darkness has another side. Darkness made the cover of the journal Christian Century and even Time magazine a few years ago on articles about Barbara Brown Taylor, a famous preacher in this country, who wrote a book called Walk in the Dark. that argues that darkness holds divine mystery. It offers us something. Embracing darkness and letting go of control can be a good thing. Letting God lead can be a good thing. Certainly, it is so in the Bible. Abraham encountered God in the dark of night when God promised him descendants more numerous than the stars. And the Exodus happened at night, and God met Moses on top of Mount Sinai in the darkness. Taylor offers suggestions how to befriend the darkness. Walk slowly at night, she says. Tread carefully. Notice what you hear and smell. Pause and do not be overconfident. Watch the moon rise. It will appear on its own schedule, not ours. Unplug all your devices at night, she says. Discover that you don't need them. There's plenty of light without them. Sit in a closet, she suggests. It's easier than finding a cave. New life starts in the dark, like a seed in the ground, a baby in the womb, like the baby Jesus in Bethlehem, or like Jesus after death in the tomb. Darkness teaches us to learn to let go of fear. It teaches us to trust God and live with mystery. Some things we don't have answers to. We can think of this pandemic as a time of darkness with many unanswered questions. Paul Simon liked to write songs in the dark. He said in interviews that he wrote Sound of Silence in the bathroom where he turned off all the lights. He liked to play guitar there in the dark bathroom and dream. And the bathroom tiles made the room a slight echo chamber. The song hit number 1 in 1965. Listen to the darkness and the silence in Sound of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again because a vision softly creeping left its seed while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, 'neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared. No one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools, said I, you do not know silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made, and the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence. This time now that we are experiencing is a time of silence. We are sheltering in place instead of going out. We're being alone instead of joining in with family and friends we'd like to see. And it is the darkest time of the year. It is also the darkest year that many of us have ever had. And yet, we know that the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls. Isaiah said, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined." May light shine into your darkness. May you not fear it, and may it be well with your soul.